Tony, man, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's rare to get somebody with the exact mix of talent, skills, and experience that you have, but they make for the perfect recipe to learn through example about leadership. Now, I have here in my notes, and I want to make sure I get this correct here. You actually have an award specifically called the Governor's Beacon Award, correct? And this was received in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Can you I just want to start it there because it sets the picture for where everything else is coming from. Because you've come a long way from there and you're doing so many other amazing things. But I want to address that first. Can you give me a little background on that?
Yeah, of course, Phil. Thank you. It's great being here, by the way. Um, the Beacon Award was actually the first award that's given out from the state of California, the first time they gave that award. And it was our superintendent thought it was a good thing that what we did in the institution. What we did was we started a first ever female school. The institution the youth correctional institution that I worked at, the Ventura Youth Correctional Facility, was very unique throughout the whole state. We were the only one that housed females as well as male inmates. It was, segregated, of course, but they would share a school area. So the boys would go to school first and they'd get in their classes and all the guards would make sure. And then the girls would walk in. And then what we were seeing was a lot of times they were catcalling from their windows and it's kind of stuff that nobody should have to go through. And so the governor's office and the state and Department of Corrections decided to start a female school. And they started with actually someone else was running it before I did. And it wasn't going the way our superintendent wanted to. So she wanted me to take it over. And she goes, I don't know, this is the last ditch for us to save this program. Do what you got to do. And that's all she did. So she had some great leadership and she allowed me to be creative and think outside the box. And so we struggled the first couple weeks, months, and then I decided to humanize it a little bit. Like, why don't we make this like a regular school? Why don't we greet the students when they come in? Why don't we have like a coffee house, tea house, where we have pastries and we have, certain things. And I remember this one inmate, she walked out of her classroom and just started walking around. And I asked the teacher, why is she out? What's going on? She goes, oh, she has an IEP and she's allowed to take a individual educational plan where she's allowed to take 50-minute breaks. Then I said, you know what? Why don't we have that for everybody in the school? Everyone could take a break. So we had kind of a free movement, which is unheard of in prison. And then the inmates started thinking, oh, this is pretty good. We're not the bell rings, we're sitting down, we're told what to do, which is hard enough for people. But can you imagine an inmate who has different issues going on? And then we developed uh, a crisis intervention plan where we would have a scouting report on each inmate, like what triggers them, what doesn't, what makes them go. And so each one had a kind of a book on them. And so it's helped the teachers. So to make a long story short, throughout when we got to about 6 months in it, we saw that everybody was coming, the truancy went down, everybody was coming to school. The grades improved. They went from a third grade level to a 12.9 grade level. That we noticed that when they went to the back to their unit, their violence went down. And then it just blew up. Then we started doing our own programs. We started having, get-togethers, potlucks, the teachers, the ministers, the teachers, the clergy, recreational court. It became a holistic approach where everybody started coming to the school, and it just took off. And then staff started coming around. They wanted to be a part of this, and it just blew up. So that's to answer the question is that's how. Then when the grand juries would come, judges would come. They want to know what's going on over there. Why is this working? And all the conversation we had is we just humanized them. We just interacted with them. It was relational, not transactional, and all these things that work, but we never tried it there. It's the core element. What we tapped into something into these inmates that they never saw. And I always said, we want to be the alternative. A lot of these inmates, the ages we had, Phil, were from about 16 to 23. And so that range, a lot of them never had good experiences with men in uniform. They never had good experiences with authority figures. So I wanted to be the alternative. I knew that we couldn't blame them for not liking authority, because they didn't have good experiences. We wanted to create that good experience for them. And we just started taking off. And then it became an ownership. Like when a new inmate would come in and maybe act silly, it was the inmates that were in there already said, no, we don't do that here. And we had a couple problems, but they were far and in between, and it became an actual pleasure working there. We jumped out of bed, and it just became contagious. And it was like an experiment in human nature, where the core element, what's in our heart, it works for everybody. And they just felt that vibration, that high frequency, the feel good, and then everyone that visited the institution always wanted to go. It was called SBC, the school area specialized program center. We said SBC for short. Everybody that would come, even lawmakers from up north, from Sacramento, we want to go to SBC. We want to see SBC. So that's kind of how we became. And then we got that they created an award for us, the Beacon of Hope Award, for someone who shows a beacon of hope, a light, in what I call an alternative. So now the goal, Phil, was when they went out into the real world, they would know, hey, you know what? Somebody cared. Somebody cared about me back then. Someone gave me a chance, or did put a label on me. And I just really, really have a place for people on the margins, whether if you're real young and did something maybe silly, or where you're old and you're winding down, man, no, those people matter. Everybody matters. And it just became contagious. And I became a different person. I learned through the inmates that no, they are worth it too. And it made me better. It made our staff better. It was just a great experience, great experience. So that's how the Beacon of Hope Award came about.
What I love about this story is how important it sheds a light on human nature at in its probably most chaotic environment where almost anything could go wrong. How creating a sense of dignity, humanity, and under the right leadership, what kind of culture could be fostered, and what the consequence of that culture does when you talk about ownership, where
Yeah.
you don't have to manage and be involved. I think a lot of corollaries here carry over into the business world. um, I think it's a really interesting thing. For you, what would you say was the most important takeaway from watching that transformation? I mean, I heard you say you got up in the morning every day and there was like a different sentiment. Was there any particular moment where you said to yourself something along the lines of like, wait a minute, this something is happening here that I think I'm going to carry with me for the rest
Yeah.
of my career in life?
Yeah. I always heard, I was when I was young, back when, you're probably too young, Phil, for this, but when things were on cassette, and I remember Jim Rohn, who was Tony Robbins' mentor, and he had to say, when you know your why, the how becomes easy. And I always never that, but then I started living it. Oh, this is my why. I love people on the margins. I love being, maybe that's my purpose. Maybe that's my why. No, and I think we can always find new whys. And I'm not want to be sappy about that, but it's just that to answer your question, that's what it was. It was like, oh my God, I think this is it. And it's something like, Phil, you can't see me full length, but man, I'm 5'6". I ain't the best looking guy in the world, but man, I can love, I can care, I can have compassion, I can be generous, I can do that, and I like that. I find that's my love language. That's it, and I don't want any credit. Want to have somebody, uh, you're made a great reference to how even in the business world. And what I noticed, what you did at SBC in that girls' school area in the institution, was when we did an act of kindness or did something nice, it felt good for me and it felt good for the inmate. But you know what, Phil? And goes for the business community, the people watching, they felt good. And that's what I discovered later was, we had an impact on them. They were seeing the guy, the old officer, or maybe even staff member that might have been resentful, why is he being nice to those murderers or those inmates or people that did that? Um, because we're part of that. We mentioned earlier off camera was 400 trillion to one chance that we're all here together. That's it. That's the odds of life. And so we're all lotto winners here. Whether you did something horrific or your upbringing was different than mine or whatever, you're different ethnicities, different culture, race, all that, it doesn't matter. We're all here on earth. We're all the lottery winners. 400 trillion to one chance of us being here. And it's sacred. We all have a sacred self about us. And it's our job to find that, and to see that if we want to look for bad in others, we'll find that. But why not look for good in others? We'll find that, and we'll grow from that, and we'll be better from that. So that's what I got from that. When you know your why, the how becomes easier.
Now, I know you like to talk about non-judgmental curiosity, if my
Yeah,
notes are correct here.
yeah,
In a fast-paced startup, things are breaking all the time. People are making mistakes all the time. How would you suggest a leader in an environment like that, looking and working with a staff like that, a team like that, how should they navigate those things so they don't sweep the rug up from under their own feet and
yeah.
lose team morale?
Yeah. And I think, to be curious and not judgmental, especially if we have a partner or a coworker or someone who maybe messes up, is to be curious as not and not judgmental. Why did this happen? How can we better this? Is this an opportunity for us to grow as opposed to, oh, he's an idiot, we can't count on him, this and that? Because when you're curious and not judgmental, the recipient of that curiosity becomes more creative, and then that's what we want in the business world, or that's what we want in life, is to allow the freedom to know the next mess up, I'm closer to a breakthrough. And that curiosity leads to that as opposed to being judgment. We said, assume the best of intentions in people. Have a charitable assumption that their heart was in the right place. Maybe we can build on that. And sometimes when we make a mistake, I remember I was a football coach for over 25 years, and a lot of time the play didn't go the way we designed it to go. But that mistake turned out to be a breakthrough for this new innovating type of offense in football. So you never know what you stumble upon, and then one more failure is closer to a breakthrough if you're curious, and that curiosity allows for creativity, in my opinion. I messed up many times in corrections. Well, we can go into stories about that, but that built that resilience in me. That built that, the guy that I messed up in front of, the old guard who I was trying to impress, he didn't judge me. Then you find those little nuggets like, oh, you know what? He said, no, don't worry about it. We'll get this, but I would do this next time. You know what I'm saying? So the curious part, I think it allows for creativity.
Now, and thank you for that. I love that story. You've seen people at their lowest points and helped them reshape their future. That much is clear from your work experience. And even I imagine the same could be said when you were coaching. People can have battles with their own ego or with fear of confidence and of being able to measure up to things when things are on the line. What is the first step in sort of reparenting, if I can use that phrase, your own mindset to be able to come back from something when you feel like you failed? I imagine you came across a lot of people, like whether it was inmates or people that you were coaching, who just say, "There's just no way. I can't ever come back from this." What would you say to them?
You- There's Viktor Frankl wrote the famous book, A Man's Search for Meaning. And there's been a lot of versions of the stimulus and the response. And then in the middle is that gap that he talks about. Some people call it event response equals outcome. There's, sports performance talks about it a lot. It's that pause. It's to pause. And is it so a stimulus, something happened that maybe we can control. Then we have a response. And a lot of times we make the mistakes when we react instead of response. But if we just pause, plan, and perform, that allows us to take care of those hiccups. And it's not the end of the world. We're intentional, we're present. What can I learn from this? And it's the meaning you give any situation. So we're talking about maybe a mistake or a mess up. What meaning do I give that? Because the meaning creates the emotion, and we want the emotion. We want to feel sad, pain, suffering, because if we didn't have those, we wouldn't have elation, euphoria, right? We have to have those, but we just don't want to be those emotions because it's the meaning. Why did this happen? Why did we mess up on this project here? And in that gap, before your response is, how are we interpreting that? So just take that pause. What can we learn from here? And the meaning I encourage to give things is, man, what an opportunity to learn and grow from this. What an opportunity to go see where we know success leaves clues. Where has someone did this better than us? And what did they do? And how can we emulate something like that? Does that make sense, Phil? So it's like that pause allows us to create meaning to what just happened. That meaning gives us an emotion. That emotion now gives us that feeling. Now we feel it. Now we're in a state of mind. In that state of mind, now we're at the peak. Now we can go have massive action and do it again. Do something again that might be different. No, we'll get a different result. But it's the meaning we give what just happened. That meaning creates an emotion. That emotion creates a feeling. That feeling gives us a state of mind. Now we're at a peak state. Now we're at our best. And that's what I love.
That's awesome. Now, I from what I've gathered here in my notes, you do a lot of public speaking. Is this correct?
Yes.
When you're doing these talks, do people come up afterwards? And have you noticed any pattern in the kinds of things that they're asking you or the kinds of professions they have?
Yes, here is the comment because we do questionnaires after because I want to try to get better for the next time, and it's never about me. It's never about me. It's I want them to understand that it's all about love. It's all stuff we're capable of. And the biggest feedback I get is, and this is from top to but from everybody, is how they admire the empathy that I gave the incarcerated. That is number one. That how the empathy, and that goes back to my idea of it's the core element, because they might see themselves in someone. They might see themselves as someone who might be on the fringe, or in the margins, as we say. It maybe not in a criminal way, but they can identify with someone maybe less than, or an also ran, or something where they don't feel they feel in the lack, and that they know that people out there, kind of what you're talking about, Phil, with a coworker messing up or someone, is they know that no, it's just not one chance and I'm done. No, I want to grow. This is an opportunity for me to get better and grow. And they admire that a lot. I hear that a lot in the after talk, after when they come up to me afterwards, you go, that we love the way you didn't judge the inmate. And it wasn't that I'm being some great guy, Phil. What it was is it made me feel better. It made me better. Yeah, I almost needed that because that was why I was so resentful. I was thinking, no, no, we're all in this together. We're no one's above me, no one's below me. And when I had that approach at work, again, I jumped out of bed coming to work, and I haven't stopped thinking like that. No, I do have moments where I'm like, oh, okay, bad, but man, they last about 2 minutes. Where before in the old days, man, they last 3 days, a week. I'm not gonna lie, but once you figure it out, and I just want people to tap into that, tap into other people too. They say, like, you go to the mountaintop, it's the people you take with you that matters. Because otherwise you're gonna get to the mountaintop and you can be by yourself. It's those people, man. It's about people. It's about those 400 trillion to one odds brothers and sisters that we have.
There's something that you said, I think, before we had gotten to hit record that struck a chord with me, and that was that, especially given what we now know about your career and how it evolved, there was a time where you had this one life in your personal life, and then you would have to go to work and be this other person, and your theory that every time you had to tap into this other person that you were for work, it began to impact your personal life and all the great things that you aspired to be versus what you felt you had to be there. And when you found a way to get around that, you were able to come to a realization? And I think it's important for leaders, and I promise I'll let you answer this right after that, because entrepreneurs often have to be like a certain degree of distance away from their team as far as they're concerned, because their team could never understand, oh, there's 2 weeks left and I don't know if I'm going to make payroll, how am I going to do this, and they'll never understand. And some entrepreneurs get so lonely they do things like hurt themselves, you know. And so I think it's important to hear from someone who's been in the, what some would argue is the depths of hell, and trying to manage human behavior there, to even seeing young talent and then finding within themselves, there's something I want to be, and I see that there's something in my way. What was the mind shift for you? How did you make that with no fear that people might take advantage of you? Because I think that's really what's underneath here.
Yeah, it became, you get to a point where I was so unhappy, or oh, it was almost like, is this all there is? You go to work, and I worked a lot of overtime. So I used to do a 16-hour shift. So it was 16 hours one way and 8 the other, but the other, you're retired and stuff. And there was a study that came out um, with correction officers, and the study was the high rate of kind of what we alluded to of the suicide rate. And then what the study found and shown was it's very hard to be two different people. And I personally couldn't. And once so I kind of had that information, and I kind of was nudging, kind of going outside the box and doing a little things that were uncommon in prison, as far as the staff being, nicer, talking to the inmate, working with the inmate. Now, granted, I work with youth inmates, so I don't want the adult corrections to, you know, come at me. So they have a whole different beast there. But in my world, dealing with the youth inmate, was I found that to be true as far as the resentment and not being able to be two different people. So I just saw the revelation, and we always say that it's an evolution. It's not a revolution. We just evolved. I evolved to be like, no, this is nice. This feels good. And then I'm better at home, and I'm better with the kids, and I'm better with my wife. I'm more patient. And I used to be that guy that was like, no, I don't want to talk to them. What, out of socially, I don't want to. I always remember saying, "Oh, he's a goof." I don't want to. I had this judgment, not curiosity, when I was living the two different lives, and it became one life. I was a correctional officer 24 hours a day, not the 8 or 16, and it went in reverse. Like, no, we're not. And then you get to a threshold where, like, no, I can't. I can't do this. This is not me. I wasn't raised like this. No. And then you just make that turnaround, and it just feels good, feels euphoric, and the mystical things started happening. And then you become magnetic, where people start, I want what you have, and those kind of things. Then you felt a responsibility. No, I want to mentor this staff member. I want to mentor this youth. I want to, yeah, this is good stuff. And it was just that feeling, that euphoric feeling, that I would have, and I wanted it. Then I wanted to share it with anybody, with anyone that wanted it. And so that's how it worked. I remember hearing an interview. This is for our business leaders. Kinko's founder. He had a sit down interview with, I think, Fortune 500 magazine. And they asked him, "What's your greatest thing of success?" And he says, "You know what my greatest success is? Not being a billionaire. It's that my adult children want to hang out with me." That's what he said. And so that tells me he eventually found the balance where he wasn't the kids, so it's like, so I always think it all connects. And I want my adult kids to want to hang out with me. And that's going to be possible when I'm one person 24/7. Now, sure, you might have to put on a different hat, and you might have to go on a business trip. You might have to put the hammer down and say, all that I understand, but you can always tap into other people's hearts, and so that made perfect sense to me. That, to me, was the best way to understand a balance. And I heard someone say it's not workplace balance, it's workplace integration. You integrate your family with your work, you integrate them. No, honey, I did this. I do want to talk about my day with you. Those things are important, because we know life is so good with modern technology, all these things. Let's look at that positively. Health, all these crazy things they're coming up with that make us live longer. So if we're going to live now to 85, 95, man, let's live it good. Let's be healthy and be mentally healthy as well. It's not the old the old way of doing things where you're just, I'm the business, this is who I am. And the person that says this is who I am, we stop growing. We don't want to be that. I want to continue to grow, because it's about growth, and you grow more, you learn more, you can contribute more. And that's the fulfillment part of life, so.
What I'm curious about is I hear you talk about the heart forward posture in your interactions with people. That was a great anecdote about the interview where he said, "My kids who are adults actually want to spend time with me." A lot of the times there's this lack of title getting in the way of things. And I know that you are famous for saying, you don't need a title to be a leader. So what's the most leader like thing an intern or someone who's trying to come up and prove that they're ready to step into that power? What is the most leader like thing they can do, and vice versa? Or a leader who maybe finds himself losing the connection or the trust of their team, what can they do?
You hit the word trust. The difference between a leader and a supervisor, I work with a lot of schools and administrators and principals and superintendents. We talked about titles. To me, um, the leaders have one thing different than anyone else. They have followers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be leaders. And the only way someone follows you is if they trust you. And the only way they trust you is if you show them love. And that's, to me, that's the secret. The secret is there is no secret. It's love. It's trust. So leader is the leader only because he has followers. And the only way people are going to follow you is if they trust you. And the only way they trust you is if you show them love. And how do you show them love? You're intentional. You're present. When you ask them how their day is going, you are very, very interested in their response. And you care, you check on them. You don't check on their performance, or you don't check on their numbers. You just check on, hey, Phil, how is your mom doing? I remember last time we talked, your mom said this, you said this about your mom. Or Phil, how are the kids doing? You know, things like that. And then you're deliberate and you actually care and you do something. You have an action. You get a birthday card for someone, or you remember you had a conversation with an employee and they said something about their dad was sick or something, and then you get them a and they were traveling every Wednesday 80 miles to go make sure to do their part to take care of their dad. And you give them a gas card, or you give them Starbucks coffee cards. Hey, I know this Wednesday you're going to see your dad. Here's make sure you got some coffee, make sure you have, and here's some gas. Just those things. That's something that you heard in a conversation a week earlier. That just says you're listening, you're intentional, you're present. To me, an intern can do that, a CEO can do that. And then there's going to say, you're going to walk in a room, they're going to say, man, there's something about Phil. There's something, they don't know what it is, but that's what it is. They feel your vibration, your frequency, your positiveness. They feel it. And it's because it's genuine. You can't fool that. And so the answer to the question is to be genuine, be authentic, be yourself, show love. Just understand that the core element, what we have in common, is those elevated emotions in our heart, the love, the care, the kindness, the compassion. That's all universal. We just got to tap into it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Tony, we're closing in now the conversation, and it's amazing what we were able to cover in such a short time. But I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Is there anything you're working on that you want people who have listened to not only your philosophy and how that's worked out for you, but where all that came from? Is there anything you want them to know about something you're working on, or any website or social media channel you want to direct them to?
Phil, that's a, uh, this sounds silly, and I'm not into all that kind of stuff. I'm really not. I just want people to understand that I the core element is your heart. Tap into other people. The secret is there is no secret. And just my little journey of how I grew, and it's all about growth. wanting a growth mindset, wanting to keep getting better, wanting to learn more, wanted like this conversation was the best thing that ever happened to me. And then tomorrow, the conversation I was on, that's going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's just being present, being intentional, being authentic, and understand that we're all in this together and that we have more in common than we don't. And we can grow through those commonalities and we can benefit from those commonalities. And that's my main message for anyone who wants to hear that. That's what it's all about for me.